My name's Jason Bailey. I've been with the department now for coming on 10 years. Been a planner for the whole of that time with the department. About a year and a half ago, I was asked to come and join the reform squad within the department, in particular to lead the planning and design code team, which I've been doing since. The code is South Australia's single development plan of the future. It will replace the 72 development plans that at the moment together cover the state and guide development control across the state, and will enhance the accessibility and legibility of the planning system and planning policy that affects us all, coupled with an e-planning solution and digital delivery of policy. The planning design code will make it much easier for any of us to identify quickly what policies apply to a development type at a particular location. Firstly, the way that we see the code taking shape, in somewhat crude terms, that there will be a front end that will contain definitions of development and land use, also a glossary of terms. In this front end, we see there being rules regarding how the code's to be read and applied. And in that way, this front end of the code will be doing some of the work that the development regulations do at the moment. That the back end, if I can call it that, of the code will be really the heart and soul of it. And it's here where the zones, the subzones, the overlays and the general modules that contain policies, planning policies for all of South Australia will live. There will be many similarities between the modules that the code will comprise, the zones, the subzones, the overlays and general modules. Many similarities between those and zones, etc., as they exist today in development plans. Zones will continue to be a spatial layer of policy. In the code, though, there will be a focus on zones dealing as much as is possible only with what land use and development type is envisaged therein, what land use intensity is appropriate or not, and also what built form characteristics are expected. Subzones, perhaps a bit like policy areas as we know them today, will affect some variation to the zones. That being the case, they too will deal with land use and development types expected, as well as land use intensity that's appropriate or not, and built form characteristics. They'll do that because the Planning, Development and Infrastructure Act is explicit and clear that subzones will exist to affect guidance regarding local character. Overlays within the Planning Design Code will concern a particular issue, a sensitivity perhaps, or a constraint, maybe an opportunity, and they'll deal with those to vary zone, perhaps subzone policy as well, to provide guidance in respect of that issue. Overlays will in many instances have a really strong relationship with state planning policies and state planning interests. They'll also, importantly, be able to affect procedural change, referrals being a great example, but also changes in assessment pathway. Overlays too are spatial, like zones. They will have a map associated with them that identifies where the overlay applies. Overlays can span and will span zones and subzones. General modules are the fourth policy module that we see being a part of the code. The Act is explicit about the code including and containing zones, subzones and overlays. It isn't explicit about general modules, but we see that there's still a lot of value and benefit to be had in having the code comprise these. General modules will contain policy addressing the how of development as opposed to the what, the how intents and where. General modules won't be spatial for that reason. All four policy modules of the code will themselves be made up of desired outcomes, performance outcomes and deemed to satisfy criteria. Desired outcomes will outline the purpose of a module, what the module's really trying to achieve in the broadest of terms. Performance outcomes will be expressed in a way that doesn't explicitly identify how they are to be achieved or satisfied. It's in this way that the code will offer some flexibility to applicants. It'll open up to an applicant the opportunity to propose various ways of satisfying a particular outcome. Deemed to satisfy criteria offers a certain way of satisfying a performance outcome. Not every performance outcome will be partnered with a deemed to satisfy criteria. A really important component, mechanism of the code is going to be the assessment table. Assessment tables are the mechanism that allow us to connect policies to development types. Without it, a digital planning system cannot work. If we're to realise this situation where any of us at any time can enter a location and enter a development type into our system and get the rules that are relevant to those two variables, if we're to realise that, get that, we need to preload what policies will be relevant to a development in a particular location. This feature of our current system, with planners identifying what policies are relevant, essentially on an ad hoc basis, it makes our system more opaque than it needs to be, whereby applicants can't be certain what tests their proposal is going to be assessed against. So yeah, that's going to change. It has to change for us to be able to deliver digitally planning policy as needed. The greatest benefits of the code are going to be enhanced accessibility of planning policy and legibility of planning policy for us all. I see that centralisation of the rules will enable a clearer focus on reform priorities. We're finding some of the differences in planning policy across or between development plans at the moment, and we can clearly see where policy in some plans has fallen behind others, and centralisation of the rules means that when an amendment is undertaken or affected to policy, all boats will rise at once. All councils will receive the benefit of that reform. We've got a long road ahead of us in recreating all of the planning policy for all of South Australia. The Commission, with its policy discussion papers, invites all of us to help devise and shape this policy and how we transition what we've got at the moment, let alone how we create and what should be new policy in the code that South Australia perhaps has never seen before. If I could leave you with one message today, it would be that we would love your thoughts, suggestions and ideas on how we build the code. And there are many ways that you can get them to us. There's the formal consultation opportunities, of course, but importantly, our door is always open, and we really would welcome suggestions at any time.